So for the past couple weeks, I've been hosting a game jam with the theme Use It or Lose It, and this past weekend marked the end of the review period, so the scores are in. I hosted this game jam to celebrate hitting 2,000 subscribers on this YouTube channel, and let me just say, the response for the game jam was phenomenal. We had over 100 game devs sign up to join, and then in total we had 45 submissions to the project. And believe it or not, I actually played every single playable game that was submitted to my game jam. During the rating period, over 600 reviews were submitted for these 45 games, which is how we ended up with a final ranking. These games were all judged on the same 4 categories: style, gameplay, use of theme, and creativity. And these scores were combined to get an overall ranking as well, and that's how you might determine the winner. If you're new to the concept of game jams, essentially it's a challenge for game developers to make a very small game project within a short time frame, usually revolving around a given theme. I've done game jams before, and they're a great way for indie game devs to try new things and learn and grow. The first, and I guess only game jam that I joined was the Game Maker's Toolkit game jam, and the theme was role reversal. With the game I submitted, the setup seemed like you'd be stepping into the shoes of an axolotl hero to save a princess from an evil villain, but then when the game actually started, you were playing as the villain, just sort of waiting for the hero to show up. Personally, I see game jams as a very, very important tool for new game devs to learn and grow, and that's why I was so excited that so many people joined this jam. And yes, I really did play every single playable game in this, and yes, I'm going to review them all right now. This video also serves as the big announcement of the winners of the game jam, but I don't really like framing it in that light. Yes, there were winners, and I will announce them both overall and for each category, and they should be very proud, but no matter where you fall in the order here, it doesn't really matter. In my mind, game jams aren't about winning or losing, they're about learning and growing and trying new things. And I should know, I ranked very poorly with the game that I submitted to the Game Maker's Toolkit game jam. I wasn't even in the top 3,000, not even in the top 4,000 games that were submitted. And yet, I was still so proud of my accomplishment just in submitting it and getting it done, and from what I learned through the process. Honestly, it was invaluable. And I don't care that my game wasn't reviewed well, because it wasn't about the product so much as it was about the process and what I took from it. And I hope that you guys feel the same way about the games that you've submitted. So, without further ado, let's just start working our way up through all the games in order of overall score. But before we actually start on number 44, I want to give a special honorable mention to Brovia, who designed the winning concept art for the pie enemy in the game that I'm working on, Toby's Topsy Tail. They messaged me, apparently they missed the deadline to get their game in, but I played it anyway. Their game was called Thickly Escape, and it mainly focused on this thick boy.
Damn, boy, he's thick! Boy, that's a thick-ass boy!
Trying to escape a burning building by throwing things around, and I thought the design was very charming and humorous. The obvious issue was that the camera was not properly set up on the character, so it was very, very difficult to control or really see what you're doing at any given point. And that was a bummer, because honestly I wanted to look around and see the design of everything. And I also know when I was working on Toby's Topsy Tail, I spent like a week alone fine-tuning the camera the first time I set one up, so no judgment for having issues with that during a game jam. As difficult as it was to see what I was doing, it was actually still a lot of fun throwing things around. All in all, I think Thickly Escape was a game that I really wanted to be able to play, but it felt like the camera fought me every step of the way. That being said, if they update it, I will definitely try it again. And since I mentioned my indie game, let me just quickly plug that Toby's Topsy Tail is now available to wishlist on Steam if you're into 3D platformers and or psychological horror, link in the description. Also, the devlogs are on this channel if you want to watch those. Anyways, first up, at number 45 is a game called Pirate Jankin by Radmonkey. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. This submission was described as a pirate-themed rock, paper, scissors online, and unfortunately I wasn't really able to play it. Apparently this was the first attempt at an online multiplayer by Radmonkey, and while that's a brave thing to attempt, I think the scope was way beyond what a starter game dev should attempt for a game jam, even a longer one like this. Also, they were so caught up in the idea of trying to make an online game that they just forgot to use the theme. That's not me being mean or anything, they say that themselves, they just forgot to include the theme. So make sure when you're taking on a project that you keep the scope reasonable and don't bite off so much that you have to focus on not choking. That being said, pirate weasels were a very fun concept. At number 44, we have Car Luck, submitted by Gaming Horizons. When I first booted this one up, I was confused by the menu because it was incredibly small, It was also one of the very first ones I downloaded, so I kind of thought maybe I'd made a mistake, but no, it was just smaller, low resolution window for the game. There was very little visually to this game, but the mechanics, pun intended, were clearly intended to have quite a bit of depth. However, I didn't really understand them. It involved balancing money on car repairs, I believe, and the risk that your car will break down if you don't upkeep it. I wasn't really sure number-wise what was going on under the hood, pun intended again, but the numbers didn't make a lot of sense to me. The developer prefaced this game with the disclaimer that they made it in 5 hours with almost no experience, and they were aware that it wasn't perfect. And let me just say, it doesn't have to be. This is a great first step, and honestly, I'm so glad to see someone take one of those first steps. So congratulations, you're a game dev now, and I hope that you continue on your journey. This is something you should be proud of. Up next, at 43rd, is Bomb Tosser by Sven77. This one caught me off guard. Not by the game itself, which I wasn't even able to play because it was a 7Z format, but by the rude comments that were made by this developer in their submission page. I thought about just skipping this entirely, but I decided to address it. Apparently they had an issue submitting or something, and then they accused me of ignoring them and deleting comments trying to fix it. For the record, I never deleted any comments, and I don't remember ignoring anyone. In fact, I think quite a few people from the jam would argue that I was very accommodating and went above and beyond to help them get their game out and issues fixed. It was so weird to just stumble upon a submission to my game jam throwing shade at me.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
I was still going to try and play this game, even though that was the attitude, but the download for it, like I said, was a 7Z format for some reason, and given the blatant disrespect thrown at me, I just didn't really feel like putting in the work to convert it. Honestly, this whole thing just came off as very unprofessional and childish and a little petty. Like, seriously, I'm just one guy who put in a lot of work to help people who had issues with the game jam, and if I missed your attempt to reach out, genuinely, I'm very sorry. But this was a very inappropriate way to address it. This wouldn't fly in the professional games industry, and that sort of negativity would make you an outcast amongst other indie developers as well. My whole community is built on helping others and raising them up, and I could honestly never imagine behaving this way to anyone who was trying to host a game jam I was participating in. Look, negativity and a poor attitude will close so many doors for you if you don't learn to fix it. And I genuinely hope that if you learn anything from this game jam, that it's that. Anyways, next up at 42 is It Came From the Expired Box by Molten Knot. To start off, this developer faced the same issue as the last one, but rather than attacking the game jam host, they just said, "Hey, I messed up, here's the new link to play it, sorry," and moved on. So thank you, Molten Knot, for being a prime example for approaching problems with a positive attitude. Thank you. First off, the game had a very simple style that I kind of liked. I personally loved how the little stubby legs moved around when you walk. I thought that was fun. I do wish that the style had been consistent between the different parts. The menu here is very different than how the game looks, and the UI stands apart even more. And the style of the game would have worked completely, I think, if you had just kept the look consistent across the entire game. Consistency with a simple art style makes a game look stylized. Without consistency in style, it can come off as just kind of unfinished. It's not a perfect game in terms of art, but there's some heart here, and I really respect that. Also, the gameplay was made very difficult because of the limited space and how fast the alien things moved. I wish I would have had a few more seconds to adjust before the enemies came after me, especially since it was kind of a little glitchy sometimes trying to pick up the boxes that you're supposed to throw at the enemies. I felt like I was constantly fumbling to try and do anything. I didn't get the special ending that I think was available if you beat the game. I saw someone post it in the screenshots. And also this screenshot reminds me of something. A meme, maybe. Anyways, this game was ranked 42nd overall, but it was ranked a little higher in the use of theme, as the boxes do disappear if you don't pick them up fast enough. Ranked at 41st was Wake Up by Landon124. This one was very simple, but it did have a fun concept. Unfortunately, it was far too brief and not really replayable to any degree. The setup says that you're a babysitter babysitting kids, but as far as I can tell, that must have been scrapped, a scrapped concept, as the game was actually seemingly about a soul trying to find their body before it disappeared. It essentially ended up being what amounted to 2 quick rounds of hide and seek with a really quick timer counting down on you. When you started the game, text popped up, but everything moved too fast to actually read it. And watching the recording back, you have literally like a second to read the direction before you're looking for your body and the counters counting down. Also, when I played the first time, I literally looked around and ran into an invisible wall immediately. I'm not kidding. I looked around, chose a hallway to run down, and immediately hit an invisible wall. I did kind of like how the menu gave me security camera vibes, the way it was placed up in a corner in this weirdly barren classroom. Just like a bunch of desks staring at a blank wall, and it's all too cramped to ever be like a functional classroom, but also it was too tidy to be like a storage area for them. I thought the liminal space vibes were very cool, but it did break the immersion on that with the invisible wall for me, like right at the beginning. When you find the body, the design of it was actually pretty cool. It was also very unnerving the way the body is just floating when you first find her, and it's even more unnerving that the second time she's just standing there. Personally, I think this one could have been improved by making the space much larger to play into the liminal space, getting rid of the invisible walls, extending the timers along with that, and randomizing where the body appears, because the way that it's set up now, it was too easy when you already know where she'd be on any of the future playthroughs. I think these changes would have given it a lot of replay value as well. This game, like quite a few games in this jam, I think could have really been improved by just adding some story to provide some sort of context. You'd be surprised how quickly and easily you can improve a game just by adding some lines of exposition on the screen before the game starts. Players like to know what they're doing and why, and just a little bit of story context can make an okay game feel like a great game. And honestly, I think maybe I have some examples later of how to do this well. So just adding some text on the screen before your game started, like,
I feel my body slipping away. Maybe if I can find it before it grows cold, I can still save myself. I don't have much time.
Boom. You got a story and a reason for players to engage with the content, and I don't think that would take very long to add. All in all, I thought Wake Up was a cool idea, but the execution could have used some work. I hope that's fair to say. However, for a starter game dev working on a deadline, this was pretty cool. In 40th place, overall, is Dark Road, submitted by Slime3000FKY, apparently on behalf of Pascal Studios. The first thing I noticed was how dissonant the menu was from the creepy images I'd seen of the gameplay. Well, no, to be fair, the first thing I noticed was title. I'm not going to give anyone too much grief about mistakes for Game Jam submissions, but that one was pretty glaring. Just putting Dark Road would have been nice. And Game Jam's little mistakes are totally okay to miss, it happens, but you should really be watching out for big mistakes that are going to pop up. Anyways, I went to the credits first, because that's usually what I do if the option is there, just to test things before I start playing the game, and the credits played through, and to be fair, this did fit the actual game a little better, theme-wise. However, when the credits ended, for some reason I was just thrown directly into the game with no idea what I was supposed to do. I turn and I see a creepy guy trudging towards me in this weird alley, and I instinctively shoot at him. He disappears, and there's a sound effect, catches me off guard, but there's more coming. I turn to shoot again, and nothing. It won't shoot, and I die. And I was very confused. So I actually hit the play button again this time, and when I entered the game, now a screen does pop up that gives you some instruction as to what you're actually supposed to do, and it's just very factual. The enemies looked interesting, they were kind of creepy, and the sounds they made as they were coming up to you were also very unnerving, but because of how dissonant everything was, specifically like the menus and how blank the environment felt, it never quite succeeded in being anything that fit well together, and so the horror didn't really land for me. This is also a prime example of a miscommunication in the meaning of the phrase, use it or lose it, and there were a few games like this with the interpretation of the theme being use an object or lose the game. For example, use the bullet, the one bullet in this gun, or lose the game. And while this isn't technically wrong, it does go against the spirit of what use it or lose it means. Typically, it refers to the inherent choice of using something or else losing that something. It sort of like loses the meaning when it's interpreted as use one specific thing or lose some other more general thing. But I'm not going to harp too much on that. I just want you to know my understanding of the term so you know why I respond better to certain uses of the given theme. And of course there are language things that will also affect how people interpret what it meant. Anyways, Dark Road was a little creepy, but there were several issues that kept it from living up to its full potential. That being said, nice job and thank you for submitting. Next up, at number 39, was Shadowed Steel by Spawn's Hope. And this one I think was a divisive one. Obviously, when I first started the game, my first thought was, wow, this looks great. But clearly the elephant in the room is that a lot of these pretty much all of these assets were just pre-made or pre-packaged or pre-purchased by the developer. And I could tell that this was a divisive thing because of how this game ended up being ranked and some of the comments. But personally, I think it also represents, you know, what it might be like for a developer in the field. For example, if you're only a programmer, you're just going to be given assets by whoever is on your art team. And in the same way, if you're doing a game jam and you're only trying to grow your coding skills, I don't personally see it as a problem to just use assets that were made by somebody else, assuming all the rights and everything are there and you've paid for them or whatever you need to do. Furthermore, the developer was very upfront that he had used assets that he hadn't made, and made clear that he was even in the process of learning how to make things, or was about to start. Anyways, the gameplay. So when I first started playing, there was this narration that started, and I just kind of kept pushing forward, and I think I triggered another narration that started on top of the other one.
Listen, I'm only going to explain this once. If you don't keep me satisfied, i.e. kill things, can we maybe die and wait for someone else to pick me up who will? Now that that's out of the way, let's go find something to kill.
And so I just kind of stopped because I had already messed up this run, and when I'm playing, and especially when I'm recording for this type of stuff, I want to make sure that I have the experience that was intended. So I didn't want to accidentally break the narration and make it cycle on top of itself. So I just stopped and I went through the credits like I always do, and I restarted.
Listen, I'm only going to explain this once. If you don't keep me satisfied, i.e. kill things, I'll let you die and wait for someone else to pick me up. Can we maybe, I don't know, kill something? Out of the way, let's go find something to kill.
And the narration did that again, even though I hadn't moved to the next trigger point. So I assume it was just accidentally programmed that way. So that was confusing. Whenever I start playing, I just kind of take a cursory glance at whatever instructions are given for the controls and see what I can memorize. For some reason, I could figure out how to get my shield out for this, but I could not for the life of me figure out what button at first brought out the sword. So I ended up just stumbling upon this enemy lurking over here and running up to him and just kind of bashing him with my shield over and over and over and over and over again. And eventually I did stumble upon, I think I just suddenly remembered a button that pulled out the sword, and I started using it, and that was fun. One thing I noticed right away is I think that the voice for this game, the narration, was AI, but it came off as very like passive-aggressive and judgy sometimes, and I don't know if that was intended.
Can we maybe, I don't know, kill something?
Like you pull out your shield and it's like, oh yeah, what a great idea, use your shield.
Oh, sure, use the shield. That'll go well.
Or you find this lock and it's like, maybe you need a key, dumbass.
Maybe you need a key?
Basically, right? Anyway, so I keep going, and then right away I stumble upon this big thing, and the narration starts.
It's in there for a reason.
Anyways, I'm dead. So I just restart, do it again. I didn't realize right away that kind of the big mechanic of this is the more that you kill, the more that you like satiate your blade with blood, the more damage you will actually do. There's kind of a combo counter that keeps going up. And if you don't use your sword enough, eventually you'll lose that bonus. Thought that was a super cool mechanic personally. So I just kind of kept mowing my way through enemies, seeing how high I could get the bonus to go up. It was actually pretty fun. Personally, I really genuinely enjoyed the combat from this game, but I don't think I like enjoyed it in the way that I think was intended. Like I didn't enjoy it in like a high fantasy epic kind of way, or like a Dark Souls kind of way. I kind of just had fun with it because it was fun to hit and watch the numbers go up and deal more damage each time, and this grew very quickly. And also it was very fun that sometimes you'd be fighting an enemy and they would just go, I'm done. I'm good. I loved that they would just walk away from you. Great mechanic. Probably not intended, and probably just a first attempt at AI, but I thought it was so funny every time. But I did genuinely enjoy attacking and watching the numbers go up and watching it deal more damage each time. Eventually you find the key, you go through, and you beat the game. So not super long, but I felt like there was some depth here, and I did genuinely enjoy this one. Up at number 38 is Mana Masters, made by Worm Wizard. Worm with a Y. To start off, the menu had kind of punchy sound effects. It was nice to go between the different things, the instructions, the credits, everything was just kind of nice. Very simple, but very nice. When I jumped into the game, I guess I wasn't expecting it to be 3D for some reason. I guess I just hadn't looked into it, so it was kind of a nice surprise. I think this was the first 3D one I ended up playing. The graphics weren't anything groundbreaking, but I thought they were also, in a simple way, very visually appealing. It seems like you have a few different attacks here. You have these purple balls that you shoot out that are spells. You have fireballs you can shoot. Again, very simple, but honestly kind of fun to shoot. One of the core mechanics of this game that kind of fit into the use it or lose it is every second you're burning through your mana. So you have to use these spells before you're just not able to use anymore. So it's better to use them on spells than to just watch them waste away. I liked the variation in spells. The first two are very fun. I like when you finally get the fireball and it just shoots out. The effects on that are really nice. It seems like there are a couple different types of enemies at least for you to fight. I think some of them shoot the fireballs back at you. All in all, this wasn't anything groundbreaking, but again, it was just kind of fun to play and fit the theme pretty well, so great job. At 37, we have Corporate Madness, or I guess it was also called Legacy Inc., depending on which version you played. I think the name changed a couple times, but it was submitted by Yusuf Kobalov. This game had some fun mechanics, and I feel like the cartoony style was very consistent across the entire game, so I felt like that was nice. I felt like right off the beginning, there's this setup of, managing days and profits and money, and they give you these tasks, but I quickly burned through all those, assuming that, as you played the game, more would pop up as the days went by. But no, I guess that was it. Once you're done with the tasks that are first given to you at the beginning of the game, they're gone. From there, you just have kind of use it or lose it opportunities that you can choose by hitting the plus at the bottom. The tasks were interesting. I didn't feel like I understood all of them. For example, there's the stock trading one, I think is what it was called, and you kind of just watched a ball go up and down. I genuinely had no idea if anything I was doing impacted what was happening. To me, it felt like nothing I did mattered during this section. But I think this was the only one where it did feel like I didn't have any control. The other tasks were just basic and interesting, and then when it came to the use it or lose it mechanic, there were a lot that repeated, but I think there were also a lot of really funny commentaries on capitalism. So, I'm always down for that. That was pretty funny. Other than that, I genuinely felt like there weren't a lot of choices that I fully understood. Obviously giving money or losing money, but then there were percentages and investments you could make and things like that. And I wasn't ever quite sure what they meant or how it worked. I kind of figured that when you got to $0, like when you ran out of money, the game would be over. But it wasn't. You just kept going. And there were other elements that you had to balance, like it seemed like employee satisfaction or happiness or whatever was up at the top. And I never felt like I fully understood what was happening in this game in terms of the mechanics, but at least until I burned through all the tasks, it was pretty fun. So I will say, even though I didn't fully understand it, it was consistent across the board in terms of look, and if there was just a little bit more to do throughout the game, spread out as the days went by, I feel like it would have been a much better game. That being said, again, consistent, and I did enjoy it. I'm not sure if there was an ending, I didn't get to it, but all in all, it was a pretty good game. Up next, at number 36, is Light Balls by Custom Chris. Shout out to Custom Chris. He helped me set up my Discord when I was first getting all this YouTube stuff figured out. Great guy, incredible 3D artist. But I'm going to try not to be biased as I go through this. He was ranked 36th overall. He's a very new game dev, but he was also ranked number 25 in use of theme. And he's pretty new to game dev specifically, like very, very new. He's just put a lot of work into 3D art, and I really respect that he took the time to join this game jam and really give it a try. I think for a starter game dev, it actually looked really great. I think clearly there were some obvious issues. Also, the game lagged quite a bit, but I thought visually it was appealing. I thought it was very interesting when the balls would chase after you because they kind of just follow you and then explode. Also, when the game first started, you pick up this ball of light, and I started reading the sign, and then it lasted exactly to the point where it's like, oh, it's going to disappear after so many seconds, which I thought was really funny comedic timing. Probably not intentional, though. Again, there was some intense lag at times, but I also felt like it was kind of to be expected with someone who's just learning game development. Also, sometimes the light would shift in ways I didn't understand, where it would be very, very dark, but then when I'd get into a lighter area, suddenly it felt like it was almost daytime. Wasn't exactly sure how that ended up working out. I'll also say one of the things that felt most interesting about this was the kind of ambiguity of everything that was going on. I think because I didn't fully understand what was happening, it raised all these questions in my head that made me feel like exploring and trying to find out if there's something deeper going on. A really vague, interesting concept that feels like it has more depth can keep people hooked for a very long time. It felt like this world had something I needed to find, but I was never able to. So I'll leave it at that. I just want to say great game, great guy, Custom Chris, you're awesome, and thank you for joining the jam. Next up at number 35 was Interstellar Rush by Just Johnny. This one ranked number 35 overall, but it actually ranked number 22 in style. However, it also ranked number 41 in gameplay. And I think when I show you, it'll start being pretty obvious why. I think the design of the spaceship was incredible. A lot of the UI looked really good too. The problem is, this was pretty much it in terms of the gameplay. You sat at this little station and things would occasionally pop up and you'd be given choices. And these choices would essentially give you the option of doing something to maybe get some food or some, other things that you'll need for the trip. However, doing so will probably cost you time. And apparently it seems like you have a certain amount of time to get to the destination. So it's constantly choosing whether to use an opportunity or lose that opportunity. And that was pretty well. It ranked number 25 in use of theme, so clearly people did recognize that. Again, the ship looked incredible. It was a great setup. However, nothing beyond that really happened. You can't even look around. You're stuck in this view. I think that the pop-ups that came up were sometimes very, very interesting and hinted at a lot of cool ideas and options, concepts. They were very intriguing, but because it was just text, there wasn't a lot to engage with. And also, sometimes it would be like tediously slow in between pop-ups, and it really made the entire experience drag. It almost felt like Interstellar Rush was meant to be like an ironic name, and I'm sure that's not what was intended. Like seriously, I'm gonna just show you. So you have a pop-up, and then you make a choice, and then regardless of what the choice is, you have to wait for the next pop-up, and this is how long it took. Nothing really going on. You have numbers slowly counting down. Again, it looks pretty, but that's pretty much all you have. And then another pop-up comes. I feel like if everything had just been kind of pushed to be more high stakes, this setup might have worked a little better, but as it is, it felt very tedious. Great game, I just wish there was a little bit more going on. Coming up at number 34 with over 20 ratings, we have The Game of by Debug. This game was ranked number 34 overall, but it was ranked number 14 in use of theme. And it was also ranked a little higher in terms of creativity. I will say I was very, very confused at the start of this game, but over time it felt like I was slowly piecing it together like some big puzzle. Like, it seems like you're constantly having the option of just like clicking to make a decision to like add coins or lose luck, and I wasn't sure what any of that meant. There was also an option on the side that was like 50 coins, 1 CPS, and I had no idea what that meant. And then there were other like grayed out options, and it seemed like the things that you could click on related to some like random fantasy item, like torches or buckets or ropes or things like that. But I wasn't really sure if that mattered, or if it was just about the numbers below it. There were these little red and green things that kept popping up, and I assume they had to do with how much time you had before the option to click each thing was gone. But again, there were 2 for some reason I didn't understand. As I was clicking, the numbers did go up, specifically like the coins. A lot of the people commented, and I agree with it, that it was very addicting to watch the numbers go up, but it was also just a lot of clicking. This is all that there was visually right here. Things did change a little bit when you were able to like add strength and agility, and then it would start having things pop up on the bottom to show what you were fighting. So it was very much like text adventure. You kind of just had to put in your head the things that you were fighting. A lot of the times they went by so fast, and other things were happening, you couldn't really focus on them. However, a lot of them were actually pretty interesting. I'm sure it was randomly generated based on things they'd input, but sometimes things would pop up that were like really funny. Like I think I got like intelligent rock at some point. Just things like that. I do remember having this like epiphany when I realized that CPS means like coins per second, and so that's why it was important to like raise that. I wasn't sure if raising strength or agility actually affected combat. I think maybe it just made each fight go a little faster. There's the one bar that was for the fight, and then there was the lower bar that was to essentially raise to get to a boss battle. But I don't know if you could like lose or die. That was never made clear. I just kept clicking and clicking and clicking and making the numbers go up, and eventually I like prestiged, which pretty much just reset everything as far as I can tell. It didn't really do anything else. So I restarted, and at a certain point, to me, this game just kind of became about how high can I make these numbers? Can I like break it? Is there a point when like the numbers are going to be too big? And that kind of became the game for me for a little while, which wasn't like the point of the game. I kind of had to make my own fun with it. This whole thing to me kind of felt like a little minimum viable product for some type of like fast-paced RPG, but there wasn't anything visually to go off of. The appeal was kind of the same as like those idle cookie clicker type games where you just click and watch your numbers go up, and then eventually you get to the point where the numbers are just going to go up on their own whether you do anything. And it's kind of just fun to watch that happen. It releases like good chemicals in the brain, you know what I mean? So I fully understand why this game got the ranking it did. I personally played it for a very long time, so clearly there was something addicting about it. But at the end of the day, it was pretty basic in terms of art, and I feel like if this were fleshed into a more appealing product, it could actually go places. So nice job. Ranked at number 33 with 20 ratings is Butter Hurry by Big Bubba Games. This game might have been ranked at 33, most of the other categories were pretty close to that number, except for use of theme, it was ranked at number 9. So pretty high up there, actually. My first thought when I opened this game was, you're butter with wings. Huh, that's pretty fun. And then I immediately started failing again and again at the controls, until I kind of got the hang of them. This game used the theme really well, genuinely, where if you didn't use one of the controls, it would literally just stop working and you wouldn't have it anymore. And this was pretty quick to happen, so it really kept it on your mind to use each button so that you didn't lose it. That being said, this is one of those where the platforming is just difficult because the controls didn't feel like they were optimized to feel good. Which again, for a game jam, you can't judge that too much, but I'm just not a fan in general of platforming that's difficult because the game is difficult to control. If eventually you can't get to the point where it just feels natural within a certain amount of time, there's something wrong there. I also couldn't figure out why I would just like randomly die sometimes. I just couldn't figure out. Eventually I got to the point where I was like, is it due to some type of timer? Is it like fall damage? I couldn't tell because sometimes, you know, it felt like I would just die for no reason. There were these, I think they're like the symbol of the game maker program, the heads just around. I'm guessing that these were meant to be maybe a different icon, or maybe this was just like a funny joke I didn't get. I don't know. But I genuinely did not realize these were enemies. There's not like feedback that you take damage when you hit them, but these are how I was dying. You do hit them and you take damage, but there's just like little numbers that pop up in the corner. So it's very, very, very easy to miss that you've even taken any damage. Legitimately, when I started, I thought that they were like some type of power-up that was broken, or maybe they were checkpoints since they didn't really seem to be doing anything that I could tell. Genuinely, pretty confusing. I'll also say, other than like the heads, I felt like there was some genuine style here. So, mistakes and all, it was a good game that used the theme very, very well. At number 32nd, submitted by Klimpack, we have the Demon with Limited Power and Can't Use It. I think that was the implied second part of that. First off, I'll say I loved the intro. Whatever this little demon creature was felt really cool, and again, I love when a game gives you some type of exposition to set up what you're doing. Otherwise, it just feels like a mini game. So this was a cool setup. However, it did feel pretty different than what the actual game ended up being. You kind of hop in and you're this like little, it feels like a little boy. I think maybe it's not supposed to be that. And you're just in kind of like a nice island with a field and trees and all that. Looks like there's like a little crypt going down and then a statue down at the bottom. You can swing a sword, you can walk around. The statue seems to be like ethereal. I thought you'd be able to interact with it in some way, but I guess not. So you go down into the dungeon, and clearly there's some visual problems going on here where you can't fully see. I didn't know if the red bar was your health or some other thing counting down. There were spells you could try and use. I didn't fully understand how those were supposed to work. There was no feedback that you'd use them other than I think the enemies taking damage. There really just wasn't enough feedback to really understand what I was doing. I think clearly the button used a spell because all the enemies took damage, but there was nothing to indicate that that was actually happening. I also wasn't sure what anything was or meant except for the player and the enemies and the ladder. To be straightforward, I liked the art, actually. It made me nostalgic for the days of like MS Paint, and I thought the way that the character moved was really quirky. I liked it. Unless I was missing something, there is just like a very unusual loop of gameplay here. You go into the basement, you try to use spells, you go back up, rinse and repeat. It felt like I was stuck in some kind of loop and I wasn't sure if I was doing something wrong or if this was how the game was meant to be played, or if it was just kind of one level and I had broken it by like trying to go back through it if you're supposed to stop. I genuinely wasn't sure. Again, I thought the story was a nice touch. Overall, I will say that there were a very limited amount of assets, but the game itself looked good, in my opinion, for what it was. It was set up with an interesting premise, and I really wish that I understood the gameplay more and that I could have a little more fun playing it. I feel like it's got a base for something that could be really, really fun. But at present, I didn't understand it, and I struggled. In 31st place, we have Tomomancer by Lucid Wrath. With 14 ratings, this game came in 31st overall, but it came in number 15 in style. And it also ranked a little bit higher in use of theme as well. So right off the bat, this one appealed to me. I remember when it popped up, seeing the little creatures. I even saw him developing them in the Discord. I kind of saw that, and I was excited. I didn't know what the game was, but I was excited to get to it because the design of the creatures were very cool. So I clicked on it. Of course, the first thing that kind of pops up for you is you have these 3 eggs to choose. It took me right back to like Pokemon, like red and blue and green. I loved getting to pick the egg. And it kind of felt like I kind of started a Pokemon game and then somehow like got launched after I picked it into a Zelda type game, like an early Zelda. So it like really caught me off guard. I guess that wasn't what I was expecting, like at all. But I started playing, and again, I just kind of skimmed the rules, so I didn't fully understand what was happening. But then all of a sudden, this like creature that I'd created turned into like a baby. Like rolling around. I wasn't sure what was going on. Suddenly I was a baby. I actually went and checked, and apparently it's like I think you kind of like change forms into the creature, and then that's like you changing back to like your human form. But it was just so funny to be like 1 minute you're a Pokemon and then suddenly you're a baby. I'll also say I love the use of style, but also I struggled a whole lot with the gameplay. It really, really was difficult for me. So overall, great concept. I felt like I was kind of bait and switch, but that probably was my fault just because I had expectations that I wanted them to meet, and the game was different than what I expected. So that's on me. The style was pretty great, and the creature design was awesome. But all in all, really nice job, and I genuinely think you've got some great design ideas. I don't know what a Tomomancer is, by the way, but it kind of seemed like an interesting concept. So next up at number 30 is Island Escape by McDev260. This was not a very basic, kind of simple design, but I thought it was pretty artistic. Specifically, the menu looked pretty good, and when you got into the game, it looked very suitable. It was very nice. I also really love the transition from the menu to the gameplay. Just a cool little swoop there. To start off, you have to like collect things to like eat and restore your energy, and also materials to fix the ship. I will say one thing I noticed pretty quickly is that your shadow is pretty phallic. Leave it at that. I picked up some stuff. Thank God whoever was packing these suitcases was shipping vague red blocks and bananas, or you would have been screwed. Pretty quickly, I started taking like damage. Blood was popping up. I wasn't sure what was happening. I thought maybe I was overheating or something. And then I realized my energy was just low, so I needed to eat or sleep or something. I put some time into fixing the ship after I'd broken open several of these packed suitcases, and then I decided to fix my tent so that I could get some sleep. And that kind of set me back because then I didn't have anything later the next day to like keep working on my ship, and I had to explore further. That's probably the point. The levels were designed well, and the gameplay wasn't bad at all, but there wasn't much beyond this in terms of gameplay. It was very much go around, open these luggage boxes or suitcases or whatever you want to call them, and grab a banana out of them, grab whatever red box pops out. This is a good example of like the gameplay wasn't anything crazy, but it pretty much worked pretty well as far as I'm concerned. That being said, it felt like the type of game I'd played many times over. And when you make a game that's comparable to other games, you're going to get compared, and so I was judging it kind of more by those standards. That being said, again, the game looked really nice, the island was really aesthetically designed, however there wasn't a lot there to do. It was kind of a one-trick pony. That being said, it was a very good game for a week-and-a-half timeline, so nice job. Next up at number 29 was The Cabin by Lunai1. And first things first, this was a 9-day game jam essentially, and this was submitted like a day and a half in. So the fact that it's rated at number 29 is honestly pretty impressive. The style was very, very simple, but due to that simplicity, it felt very unique. And also it was able to stay consistent because of the simplicity. The mechanics were also pretty simple, pretty much just you have a light, you've got to turn it on to put in wood into the fire, you got to keep a fire burning, but you got to turn it off when the vague creepy guy comes and looks through your window, and you got to make sure you hold the door when he comes and starts knocking trying to get in. So basic but creepy. I felt like I'd played games like this before in like a 3D space, but it was kind of unnerving playing it in such like a simple 2D space. And let me just say, you gotta love a vague, creepy guy. A lot of games do them, but honestly, maybe it takes a little work to do them well. The Cabin, I felt like did the vague, creepy guy well. And when I switched it up to hard mode, I felt like it was genuinely sometimes a little nail-biting to get one thing done or the next thing done before the vague guy would come and get you. But I did like it. So, Lunai won. Nice job on The Cabin. Up next, at number 28th, with 18 rankings, is A Losing Control, submitted by Shadow Prio. Seems like this game was made by a small team, and to start out, I was decently impressed by the character and how fluid his attack felt, but it also kind of lost its charm when I started jumping around and attacking enemies. It just didn't work as well as I wanted to, and as well as it looked. You also got no feedback when you were attacking enemies, but enemies don't even pop up at first. First, let me say that eventually there does come along the mechanic where you lose one of your controls if you don't use it, but that comes a little bit later. So to be honest, I broke the game like several times completely on accident. At one point I jumped and just fell through the floor back to level 1, and then when I tried to like go to the door to like return where I was, it just skipped me all the way to level 3. Also, at one point I was like looking for the pause button because I always look for those, and I accidentally skipped the next level. And then I realized that like that's just what the P button does. It just skips you to the next level, which is very confusing. Maybe that was just like a developer like thing that they put in. But I also guess technically it does get you back to a point where you can exit the game, even if it doesn't technically pause the game. So technically all the points are hit. I thought the overall style was simple but very interesting, and I actually didn't mind the text that was in the air, just kind of giving you instruction. To be honest, I think there's just like a nice simplicity to a game that just knows what it is and just tells you what you need to be told. Especially for a game jam, you don't always have to be too fancy with it. And if you're direct in a way that isn't like too obnoxious or too difficult to like catch, then sometimes that just works. I really liked the music for the main menu. I thought that was very cool, but I also thought that it was very odd that when you actually started the game, it stopped and there was no music for the rest of the game. I wish that would have continued. Overall, this felt like a lost prototype to like an older game, and I really liked that. So nice job, everyone that worked on this game. And last thing, I just also felt like the controls are very difficult. I just felt like it was very difficult to like platform. Eventually, I realized that even though the instructions say to like wait to use the double jump until you start falling, pretty much the only way to actually use it that would do anything is to hit it like the second you jumped into the air. You pretty much have to hit jump in order to like get launched in a way that's going to make platforming in any way accessible. Next up, in 27th place, we have Haunted Household Hunt, submitted by Polly Punch. Right off the bat, I thought this game looked great. They posted a bunch of images during development, and I was excited for this one to come out. The menu looked really good. It was responsive. There were even options that let you change the like graphics and such. I love the little ghost with a hat. I thought that was such a fun design. I think the house is designed well when you start the game. The visuals are just really impressive in my mind. It took me a second to like get what I was supposed to be doing. The first time I started the level, I accidentally glitched the key that you're supposed to grab through the wall, and so I had to restart. But then when I got the hang of it, it was actually like so much fun grabbing onto an item and like pulling it. Your arm just kind of jerks behind you. It also, as embarrassing as it's going to sound, took me a minute to realize that in order to find out which object needs to be destroyed, first of all, that's how the game works. You have to find an object that's haunted and take it to the furnace to destroy it. This is kind of a tutorial area. But it took me a second to realize that you have to kind of grab it first, and it'll start glowing if it's like the evil thing. But once I got the hang of that, I realized like how much potential for fun this game had. I also love the design of the granny. She's pretty cool. Just the rollers in the hair and the hat, everything pretty fun. I love the way she kind of bounces her head and her neck and her arms around when you're running. I also thought the UI fit pretty well with everything. Once I got the hang of things, the first level was kind of difficult, but you just kind of kept going, and it was fun. It was kind of glitchy at times, but I guess that probably had to do with like the randomization. Sometimes things would pop in a random way, but that didn't bother me too much. I fought my way through the first house. That was pretty fun. The next level was pretty difficult. There were like Rubik's Cubes and things like that. It was a very creative design. The game did lag quite a bit for me throughout, after the first like tutorial section, but that is probably fully on me because I was unwilling at the start of the game to like lower the graphic settings. I was like, no, my game can handle epic, but it probably should have just been put on high. So I'm not going to put that on the developer of the game. So I'm not gonna like harp on about it. Overall, I thought this game was really well designed and really fun to look at. There were also some great character designs as well. I felt like the gameplay was kind of difficult and glitchy at times, but in a way I think that kind of added to the fun in my opinion. So, nice job, I really liked this one. Now that we're getting closer to the halfway point, I also want to stop and give another honorable mention to someone who just missed the deadline for the Game Jam. This game is called Declines by Blackener, and I think this one was really well made. They didn't push the boundaries with the art at all, but I think it looks very good, honestly. I thought the style was very consistent and looked very good. There was honestly a lot of depth to this game, and you had to make constant choices of whether to use an option or lose it, and so it fit the theme very well also. I played for quite a while. It was a pretty expansive game, honestly, and it made me think quite a bit, so I like that. I will admit I don't think I fully understood everything, but I think this is one of those games where if you took the time and put in the work to learn all of the little subtleties of the mechanics, you could get a lot more out of it. I recommend playing it. I'll also just say I really like that when you die, the game just kind of stays there. There's no exit, there's nothing after the death, it's just that. You just kind of sit there, and I thought that was kind of poignant. So overall, I thought it was a pretty fun game, and I played it quite a bit, and I just wanted to give it a shout out because they missed the deadline. Ranked at number 26th is Half Face's Ritual, submitted by username 536E. This one was so interesting. It kind of felt like one of the old Flash games, but it had a very creepy vibe to it. But to be honest, the gameplay was very frustrating due to a lot of things, including like bad hitbox detection and some very unfair attacks by Half Face that just had no telegraphing whatsoever. There was literally no way to tell they were going to come and hit you. Especially the red beams would just randomly appear places. Maybe the point of it was that it's supposed to be unfair, but when you're playing a game and it's unfair, it's gonna be frustrating. I did think the use it or lose it mechanic of like getting an option was very cool, but it also wasn't used like nearly enough. And when it was offered, I was way too stressed to even like think about it really, because there were projectiles that would like pile up on me if I didn't click the button quick enough to get out of it. And so when it went away, I would just be dead. I also felt like every time I would die and restart, almost every other new game that I started, I would immediately take damage, like literally the second the game started. And that just kind of sucked. However, I did keep playing because it was so enticing to like get to the next point of him taking damage, like at the next health bar set for him, because he would consistently fall apart more and more, and I desperately wanted to see him break. So overall, I thought the art style was unique, but I did think the gameplay was pretty unfair and very frustrating. But again, I suppose battling like an evil, soul-eating entity probably would be frustrating and difficult. So in that way, it works. At number 25, with 16 ratings, we have Hedge Run by Mark GH. This one was ranked 25th overall, but this was actually ranked number 6th in use of theme. This actually ended up being like the first game from the Game Jam that I played, just coincidentally. When I started it up, I wasn't sure at first like what the goal was exactly or what anything was. Specifically, I thought that like these glowing purple balls were like upgrades or ways to change weapons at first. And then when enemies popped out, I wasn't sure if the goal then was to like eliminate them or to get to the end of the maze. I felt like there was just a lot of confusion. Part of that's probably again because I skim, but even then, I felt like the game wasn't intuitively telling me what I needed to do. And I also struggled because I never felt like I could find the end of the maze no matter how far I went. And let's get it out of the way. To be honest, I would definitely recommend that my friends try out this game just for like the rubber chicken. This is maybe like one of my favorite weapons I've ever used in any video game. It was so much fun. It was so funny. To be honest, one thing I really wanted was more UI indicators. It was difficult to tell when I was able to use an attack. For example, it seems like there is a delay every time you use a weapon and attack before it'll actually like let you attack again, but I had trouble determining like what the timing on that delay was, which led me to just like spam the attack on weapons that I like until it would actually fire. And that was frustrating as well because there was a separate timer counting down like to when it was going to be gone. That being said, the countdown to when the weapon would disappear was actually very clear. Again, I also wanted more direction on the goals. I wasn't sure if there was an actual way to get to an endpoint in the maze my first couple playthroughs, and I started to think I didn't know if the goal was to eliminate as many enemies as possible, and then of course nothing happened when I did that. They just kept coming. However, I did find the end of the maze, and I did genuinely smile with the rubber chicken attack. I also found myself not using the gun or the staff so that I would lose it to get my favorite rubber chicken back. So that was great. Great work on that. The use of theme I thought was really phenomenal. I thought the art style was simple, but I didn't think it was bad at all in its own way. I actually really liked how the main character looked and moved, and the fact that the weapon just like spawned into each respective hand, because you had 2 of them at a time. I don't think I mentioned that before. I do think that the UI was not like consistent with the overall look of the game, so I felt like that could have used some work. Also, the enemies like almost immediately began having like a lot of trouble, and when I was trying to find an exit, they built up so fast that the entire game started to like really lag. But when they did work, when they were functioning, they were pretty cool. There was this like one point where I got pinned between 2 groups in the maze, and it actually felt pretty intense. So I feel like there is the groundwork here for this to be pretty interesting. Overall, nice job, and I really love the rubber chicken. Ranked at number 24 with 20 ratings is Battle Golf, the card game, submitted by Missy Lamott. I thought this one had like an interesting premise, but I felt like it was pretty unintuitive in terms of gameplay. I actually had to go into the comments to figure out what I was doing wrong to play. And then even when I did kind of figure it out, I felt like the actual like gameplay of the golf was still pretty difficult for me. I guess if you think about it in terms of like a card game, that the golf aspect of it should have been like secondary in my mind, but I felt like it was really a struggle to play. But also I felt like it probably didn't help that I didn't know anything about golf, and neither did my partner, and we were trying to like play it together because it said that it was multiplayer, so we really gave it a shot, but ultimately it was too confusing for both of us. One thing I'd say is that you should always think about the experience of the people playing your game and look at it through that lens as you're going through it. I felt like this one was like a real uphill battle for me to get into. That being said, I genuinely think maybe this game just wasn't like my style of game, because it ranked number 24, so clearly a lot of people really responded to it. Especially in terms of the use of theme, where you play and it seems like you can take cards from other people. Like you can take cards from your second player, depending on who wins. Overall, this feels like one of those games that like I see people playing that are like really intense like strategy gamers that I can't personally get into. So clearly there was a lot of depth here. So honestly, nice job, Mrs. Lamott. At number 23, we have Axolotl Escape by Cynic Studios. This is ranked 23 overall, but it was ranked number 11 in terms of style and number 16th in terms of gameplay. However, it was also ranked number 37 in use of theme. I do think that's because it's another situation where it's not use it or lose it in the way that I typically understand it to mean. And apparently a lot of people agreed with me on that. Let me just say, great style. The axolotl was so cute. I'm thinking that people know I like axolotls based on the last game that I made for the Game Jam. But the game overall also looked very nice. I was a little thrown off by how different the axolotl looked during the game compared to like the level itself. He really like stood out in a good way and also not a good way. He seemed like he was a higher quality than the level that he was moving through, so that felt like just a little inconsistent. There was also a lot of great things happening throughout the game that made it feel more complete. I think the entry succeeded at game feel, except for maybe a tiny bit with the gameplay itself. However, the UI, the music, the loading screens were all really well done, and they genuinely felt very, very great. So at first, I wasn't sure how I felt about the gameplay. I bumped my head a lot, and the way the wall jump mechanic worked didn't feel intuitive to me. That being said, when I finally got the hang of it, it was really fun to bounce my way up, and it mostly just felt fun to play, although I did still bump my head a lot. It was short in terms of gameplay, but I realized that's because it played well enough once I got the hang of it that you can just kind of go fast through the level and then want to play it again. There were a few platformers that were submitted to this game jam that just felt longer just because it was difficult to control, and that made it awkward to, get your landing placement and things like that. And with this game, once I got the hang of it, I breezed through it, and I just wanted more levels to kind of test myself on the mechanics that I'd gotten the hang of. And I think that's how difficulty should work. You should feel like you've grown and want to try it in new areas that are more difficult, rather than the mechanics themselves being the opposition to the gameplay. I think that platforming should be about learning the controls, not struggling against them. And this game succeeded on that, and on style, and on overall game feel. So nice job. Next up, at number 22, we have Bring Me the Water by Bitekeeper. Let me just say, this was number 22 overall, but it also ranked number 12 in creativity and number 18 in gameplay. I'm going to go ahead and say, just because of how much I'm about to talk about this game. This was probably in my personal top 5. I really enjoyed this game. However, I do understand that maybe it's just an appeal to me that other people wouldn't have, which is valid. I'd say this game is fantastic. It had a very cohesive, simple style, and it was honestly very visually appealing. I do think that the UI didn't fit with the gameplay necessarily, but it was cohesive and simple within its own kind of category. Okay, so this game like really emotionally affected me in like an abstract way. I felt something. The music and the vague nature of the gameplay lent a sense of like gravitas to the experience. I'm always looking at games as art, and the ones that allow me to do that and really lean into that affect me deeply. I really value those experiences. I see games as art, and I really value the games that lean into the art. I think this is a great example of how humans can connect to the most vague suggestion of personality. Like, The Sims are a good example, but a lot of games give too much specificity to the characters, but honestly, the more vague that you leave it, the more the players can kind of create their own ideas of them, the better. For example, I felt like I was a lot more connected to Pokemon, the actual Pokemon themselves, in the older editions than I ever felt connected to them now, despite the newer Pokemon actually feeling a lot more like expressive overall in the newer games. And I think that's because back in the day I had a freedom to kind of like interpret the older versions more in my head. In like a similar way, I really bonded to the little people here and kind of ended up creating like interpretations of them and, you know, what they're doing, what they feel, why they're doing what they're doing, more than I could ever do with like, you know, like the settlers in Fallout 4, for example. I played through this multiple times, and each time I felt like I learned something about how to do it better. The first time I collected like no water, I couldn't figure it out, the game ended. And then 12, and then like over 20. And I realized over time that the further I spread myself and the more followers that I tried to attract, the less water I actually collected. It was better to focus on the few that I had and keep them motivated. And this caused me to think about the nature of like attention and faith and community. And I think that's why I think this is a very good example of games as art. It also really affected me how they chose to word the last line once the game is complete. I didn't win, I didn't lose, but I knew I needed to do better for the people who believed in me and for the world. I think the timer also added some feeling of like a hopeful nihilism where, you know, maybe nothing matters because the world will only last these few minutes, but also in a way makes it seem much more important to shine my light on those around me while I could. Again, this is one of my personal favorites, and I kept thinking about all the ways this game could be expanded if it were made into like a fuller project. So I won't harp on any longer, but I will just say, nice job, Bitekeeper. I really responded well to this one. Up next, at number 21 with 21 ratings, was Paper Tales by Galaxy of Things. This one's so interesting because it was ranked 21st overall, but it was ranked number 2 in use of style. It was ranked number 14 in both creativity and gameplay. However, it was rated number 42 in use of theme, so really low in that category. And I think that's really what dragged it down, because again, it was ranked second in terms of style. And you can clearly see why. This game is beautiful. The mechanics were very difficult to get the hang of, but it didn't feel like it was the game's fault. I felt like it was like fully my fault. I felt like I just needed to put in more work to get it down. Also, there was so much detail around. I thought it was very fun to go through and just see the different things in the world. There's also just like a billboard up for my game jam, which was really cool. Nice little detail. The ending was really fun. Essentially, once you do enough, you kind of fly through the window. You get over here and you go through this window. And it's just kind of a sweet little message. And suddenly you realize the paper did have meaning. Call me sentimental, but I thought it was kind of sweet. I also love that clearly it's like meant to be maybe the developer. She's working on the game jam. Really, really cool. I felt genuine surprise at the ending, and I thought it was really sweet. Up next, at number 20, we have Mind Gambit by the Millikan Coding Club. Also, Yeet My Feet. So at a base level, I thought this game looked great. I also thought that it just served as a very great, simple little memory game with just enough challenge and really a great sense of style. They did mention this in like the comments, so they're aware of it, but the cards turn very, very slowly. This was an accident. But it did make it kind of frustrating to play. That doesn't take away from like the fun mechanics of the game though. I also thought it was pretty interesting how they used the term to refer to like memory in terms of use it or lose it. Like if you didn't use it, you would eventually like lose it from your mind. You would forget what the cards were. I know this happened to me multiple times where if I didn't use it pretty quickly, I would forget it was there. I would forget what it was after a certain amount of time. So I thought that was a decent use of theme. This game was ranked number 20th overall, but it was ranked number 15 in use of theme and number 13 in terms of gameplay. If the cards turned faster, if this moved faster, this game would have been a lot more fun, but I'm not faulting you at all on that. Overall, I'll say this was a really decently fun game, and it reminded me of like the card mini games on like the old Mario DS, if anyone knows what I'm talking about, and I used to play those all the time. So with a few updates, I feel like this has potential to be like a really addicting project. So really nice job, Milliken Coding Club. Up next, at number 19, we have Time Limit by Garbage Bunny 69. This was ranked number 19th overall, but it was ranked number 7 in terms of gameplay. Okay, first off, I think this is a great lesson in scope. This game did not have too much going on, but everything that it did was done really, really well. One thing I will say is that I wish there was more feedback when you took damage. Overall, I just thought this was a simple but fun game, and I thought that the controls were really decent. It controlled very well. The style felt simple and cohesive, and because it was so cohesive across the board, it felt like it looked really, really nice. So nice job. This felt like a great starter for what could be a much bigger, much nicer game. And I personally found it very visually appealing. So nice job. Next up, at number 18th, we have Valley of Despair by Sebastian Bachmann. This is another one of those that was pretty divisive based on the different categories. This was number 18 overall, but this one was ranked number 3 in terms of style, number 9 in terms of creativity, and yet number 38 in use of theme. So first things first, the style. It had this like VHS look to it that was very, very appealing, and also the gameplay itself was very creepy, and I had a lot of fun with it. Like seriously, it was a great time. The mechanics were simple, but I felt like they all worked very, very well. You go to this computer, and that lets you basically like reset the timer, like push the time back that you have before it's going to explode, and then eventually you have to like go out and find other ones, or else just kind of stand here and wait for the enemies to come and get you. The sound effects made the game very, very, very creepy in a great way, and I thought it looked beautiful, kind of exploring around, looking at everything. When the first enemies popped up, it was very unnerving. There were several things in this game that kind of made you feel like there was some lore here that was very deep and very ominous. I really loved how it felt to play. However, this is an example in terms of theme of use it or lose it, referring to use the computer or lose the game. So I understand why it ranked a little lower in that category. But again, I had a great time playing this, and I thought it was very beautiful and very creepy. I would definitely recommend this one, if those things sound good to you. At number 17, we have Thrust It or Bust It by Rick Hames Makes Games. This one was ranked number 17 overall, but number 8 in use of theme, and it's very clear why. All in all, I'm just going to say I thought this game was very cohesive. It was very fun to play, although I struggled a lot with the gameplay. First off, the menu, all of those aspects were beautiful, and they fit the theming of this very, very well. The theming of the game, that is. Essentially, kind of what you learn as you start playing is that you have to use all of these controls, and there's a lot of them to trigger different aspects of controlling the spaceship, and if you didn't use one, it would eventually just kind of give out. So you really had to balance like what you're doing without like destroying your ship. So in terms of use of theme, phenomenal. I also thought that the style was really, really good. Again, I have such a soft spot for just a really cohesive design. Personally, I like sucked at the gameplay. I was not good at it at all. I think maybe a lot of people weren't, and they didn't understand, like me, that that's really not the point. It's more about just like getting a hang of the complex mechanics. But it was ranked at like number 24 in terms of gameplay, so clearly that was kind of the weak spot. And yet again, for me personally, I didn't feel like that was the game's fault. I felt like it was mine for not putting in the work to learn it. So, Thrust It or Bust It, really cool game, really cool aesthetics, and really great use of theme. Next up, at number 16, we have Ice Patch by Tall Flob. This was ranked number 16th overall, but this one was actually the number 2 in terms of use of theme and number 7th in terms of creativity. However, the style at number 32 is kind of what dragged it down. The gameplay was also number 20, so that could also be seen as a certain aspect of this. I thought that the gameplay and the mechanics were pretty good and easy to understand. However, I struggled at first because somehow when I skimmed the directions, I missed that you have to hit S to kind of save your friend, whatever was going on here. So when you're not using a core mechanic of the game, you're gonna have a bad time. However, when I got that, I started playing. It was pretty cool, and the theme was very, very apparent throughout and very much on the forefront of your mind, which makes sense why it was number 2. It was a creative concept. I do think that it was ranked lower in style just because of how very simple everything looked, but this felt like one of those examples of maybe someone who leans more into the coding side of things really succeeding and making a product that people like and that fits a theme well. And clearly people agreed with that. I also want to say that I think the platforming was difficult. It felt like one of the ice levels in Mario, and at first this really bothered me. It felt like the friction was weird and you were kind of struggling to go around, like get to the places you needed to get to because of that. And then I realized, like, the game's literally called Ice Patch, so there's gonna be ice. It's gonna feel like an ice level. Once I realized that, I was like, oh, duh. And then it felt great. Clearly that's how it was meant to feel. So, nice job. Clearly you did something really, really right. Up at number 15th, we have Kawaii Cloud Princess by Tiny Monster Trainer. This one was ranked number 15th overall, number 29 in use of theme, but number 8 in style. First off, this one did have a really nice menu. I thought it was very aesthetically appealing right off the bat. The instructions worked well, the credits worked well, everything felt pretty consistent as far as that goes. When the game starts, there's this really cute little voice clip.
Okay, let's go!
And I think there are a couple other little voice clips throughout that are very cute as well. I thought the design of the cloud was very cute. The simplicity of all the other little characters was totally fine because the focus was very much on the cloud. It seemed like a lot of the mechanics revolved around using the spells, the abilities that you have, the lightning, the water, to kill the demon things before they can kill all your people. This was honestly pretty difficult. I felt like I had a lot of difficulty with the controls and timing out the attacks. I'm sure it's not meant to be easy, so that's fine. I thought that the effects of the attacks worked really well. I genuinely loved like when the lightning struck and the water coming down on the little enemies. Everything looked nice. Eventually, when all of your people are dead, you have this cute little pop-up that's like, oh well, guess everyone's dead. Better luck next time. I thought that was pretty funny. I'll say it again, I thought the design of the cloud was phenomenal. Just really, really cute. And I also really was surprised and really genuinely liked when one of the use it or lose it opportunities was like the option to change the entire style of your cloud. I thought that was really, really cool. I wasn't expecting it, and it still looked really, really nice. All in all, art looked great, loved the design of the cloud, even liked the design of the little people in the world. The attacks were satisfying when you were allowed to do them, especially the lightning, but I do wish it had been a little easier to control at times. Up next, at number 14, we have Tabiite by Tommy Queerna Game Dev. I hope I said that last name right. I'm going to go ahead and say this as well was one of my personal favorites. I loved this game. The simplicity of it really appealed to me. Right from the beginning, I love the setup of being in like a very low-tech future world where this was a simulation. Right off the bat, I was hooked because if you give me like a fun little creature with some like deep lore for his biology, I'm so down for it. I don't know if you know this about me, but like speculative biology projects and weird alien designs are like one of my favorite things, so this game appealed to me right away. This is a prime example of two of the things I've mentioned before, which is if you give the right amount of exposition in the right way without it dragging on too much, it can really take your game to new heights. And also the style of this one was very, very simple, but because of the way that it was set up, the way the exposition worked, the way that they had prefaced what this was, it just fit perfectly. It worked well. I genuinely loved how the little Tabiite moved. I felt really connected to it. Maybe I'm a weirdo because I really love just little cute creatures, but I thought it was a cool design. I also loved how the gameplay mechanics were built around the concept of the development cycle of a Tabiite. I thought that was a really cool way to do it and to teach each new skill. And then furthermore, I thought that the way that they used the theme was exceptional, where the reason that you were using it or losing it was because this creature, as it grows older, will start to forget that it can do things. It starts to kind of lose certain functions, which is pretty common with, age. You start to lose the things that you can do, or that you used to be able to do. And so I thought that was fitting, and I thought that was a very great way to tie into the use of theme. All in all, I love this one. I think it's a prime example of games as art. Maybe that's just because of how deeply I connected to it. But if you do simple things very, very well and keep it consistent across both style and story, you can take a game that's not the best and make it feel absolutely phenomenal. I think if this game had just been the gameplay sections without the exposition around it to know what this thing is, and what each new level kind of represented, I would not have enjoyed this game nearly as much. It was only because of the context that was given that I connected with it, both in terms of story and style. And it made passable gameplay feel really, really fun and impactful. So, phenomenal job. I really like this one. In 13th place, we have Why the Long Gun by Twice, Wilfred the Boss, Shane019, Basilon, Canyon, Steve019. A lot of collaborators on this one, it would seem, but that clearly worked. It's rated number 13 overall, but it's rated literally number 2 in terms of gameplay. And I get why. It was a lot of fun. I do think one of the things that held them back a lot was the use of theme. That was ranked number 34. First off, you can't even see it because I use OBS's ability to hide your cursor, but when you first open it and you're on the menu screen, if you move the cursor around, the little alien here will follow it with his eye. I thought that was just a really cool, neat little touch. Right off the bat, this game just felt good to play. The moving and shooting felt like I mean, there are other games that are like this, but it works and it feels great. And the reason that I know it's pretty great is because I don't usually even play these types of games, and so the fact that I immediately was like, oh, this was fun, that's a good sign. The gameplay was great. So right off the bat, you're running around, you're shooting things, and then I unlock a chest, and my gun suddenly just gets a sword on top of it. And it was really fun to be able to shoot, and then you swing the blade around and kill the enemies that hit that. And I kept moving, kept exploring. It's cool that you're just a little alien with a tinfoil hat. I liked that. There was not really any story as far as I could tell to go along with this, but when the gameplay is good enough like this, you can get by with that. I eventually find another chest, and there's this little, looks like a little small rotten brown banana. I realize later it's a boomerang, apparently, add-on, but it kind of just adds to the end of the sword, which looks ridiculous. I find this shop, Grorg's shop. I look around at his items. I don't currently have enough money to like buy anything, but this is how I realized that the thing is called a boomerang. Cool design. It means the bullets will actually come back to you if you shoot them. As you're exploring, the map up in the top right corner also like expands with you to show you the new things that you're finding. I thought that was a great detail. I quickly realized I like just kind of hitting things with my sword, so I try and do that whenever I can. I get this other power up and I go to shoot, and it just like, I don't know what this is, but it's like a loudener almost, like the opposite of a silencer. It just like explodes a ball in front of you. I'm guessing this is where the kind of use it or lose it mechanic was intended to come in, because I assume if you didn't use that, it would just go away. And personally, after I'd put it on, I quickly realized, oh, I wish I hadn't grabbed this one, but I didn't know what it was. On future playthroughs, I probably won't pick that up. Ultimately, I'm playing and I'm having fun, and what more can you ask for? I felt like with this new edition, I really wasn't doing damage like I used to do. That was kind of disappointing, but I could still hit them with my sword. At this point, I'm down to like half a heart, and I've got $42, so still not enough that I can really buy anything. So I really push on to keep exploring. And thankfully, the map does work, so it's pretty easy to keep track of where you've been. Eventually, I had to die, the screen went red, and I was disappointed because I wanted to keep playing. It's a great sign. All in all, this was a phenomenal game. Clearly, it was made by a lot of developers, but it was made really, really well. Everything that they seemed to attempt just worked, and that's great. This is a prime example of doing what you're doing really well. The scope wasn't anything ridiculous, but every single thing that they tried to do, it seems like they did really decently well. So, nice job. In 12th place, with 20 ratings, we have Arcane Amnesia by Two Sheep Games. This one was made by, it seems like a couple, seemed like they were pretty new to game development, but honestly, it was just kind of endearing how much they lean into like, we're a partnership. Apparently they go by Leg and Daka. I just thought that was very sweet. It was kind of funny that there were two games that were submitted that had to do with like magic users with bad memories. This one was Arcane Amnesia, and then there was a separate one that was submitted called Dementia Wizard. I just thought that was so funny. However, the gameplay itself and the style and everything else about both of them was very, very, very different. I thought the style of this one was appealing to me when it first popped up, and I was honestly even more impressed with the game itself. I loved the design all around. Everything down to the enemies, to the way the cards were laid out, just felt very simple and retro in a very appealing way. It felt like something I would have played on like, okay, this is a weird thing, but I would have, like when I was a kid, we didn't always have a computer, so I'd go over to my cousin's house and play computer games at her house. This felt like something I would have gone over to like my cousin's house and played on her computer. Just like a weird game she'd have on it for some reason. And I mean that in the best possible way. I genuinely had a lot of fun with this one. One thing I'll say is I was very excited every time a new enemy would pop up. There were a lot of really interesting designs. And also, one thing that was interesting is collecting the spells and watching them actually add up. The aspect of like collection in this game was also very appealing to me, and that kind of carried over. You'd find spells and you could add them, and then the next time you started the game, you could add those spells to your starter collection. I thought that was a great mechanic. I will say I enjoyed the gameplay, I really did, but not everything was like intuitive. And there also wasn't really a lot of feedback at all to indicate, progress in combat or damage taken, except for like the little numbers. There just wasn't a lot of feedback. And every time the game ended, I felt like I was like confused and surprised because of how abrupt it was, especially before I got like the full mechanics down. So honestly, it did take me a few tries to feel like I really got it, but then when I did, I was genuinely having a lot of fun. I think there are great bones here of something that could be like a really, really great project later on, and clearly a lot of heart was put into this. I really respect it. I'll also say the music was exceptional, and it really helped to sell the loop of going back into the game again and again and again. I thought that made it very replayable, and I thought also the collection aspect made it very replayable. The mechanics of it were very akin to like Magic the Gathering and other games of that vein, so I don't think a lot of that was groundbreaking necessarily, but when you throw the theme on top of it of, you might just lose these cards or these spells if you don't use them. You'll like forget them, literally just forget them. I thought that helped to kind of liven things up a little bit. So, really great job, you two. Next up, at number 11, with 10 ratings, is a game called Dusty. However, I'm going to preface this with the fact that technically this game was sort of disqualified. I didn't disqualify it from the ratings, but right now I'm telling you it is more or less disqualified. I don't mean that with any ill will. They're aware that this was probably going to be the fact. They're very upfront that they did use some AI for a little extra guidance through the game, so I didn't fully disqualify it, but I am putting a really big asterisk here that even though it is number 11th in terms of rating, and number 3 and number 5 in terms of gameplay and style respectively, this game did use AI coding and therefore it did break the rules. That doesn't, however, undervalue the fact that this was a really fun game. I just need to be upfront about that. And so if you'd prefer, technically you could consider every game before this up one step. I did just want to talk about this one though, because even though they used AI to help make the game, it seems like they used it as a sort of guidance rather than just to make the game for them, so as a tool, I see the value of that. All in all, I thought the design was super cool, especially the characters. I loved them. Just every one of them was very unique, especially the little rat. And I also thought the gameplay was very, very fun. So I'm not sure to what degree the AI was used to create this game, but all in all, it was a very fun project, and assuming the AI was used ethically, I think this is a very, very good game. Up at number 10, we have Rock the Apocalypse by 20337. This is ranked number 10th overall, but number 6th in terms of gameplay and number 7 in terms of creativity. However, the use of theme was way down at number 33, which is one of the things that pulled it back. First off, this one was super fun. I love how the menu kind of just went directly into the gameplay. This kind of felt like kind of like an old arcade game, but kind of like those newer ones where they just make the graphics look good. So I guess still an arcade game. I don't know why I'm specifying that. On my notes, I had music ? And when I looked, it doesn't seem like they made the music. I'm not sure if they purchased it or if they have the rights to use it necessarily. So I'm not going to play it here, but the music was very, very good. I just don't think they made it. If I'm wrong, please tell me in the comments. I couldn't really get a clear answer on that. All in all, I'll say that the gameplay, even though it wasn't necessarily as responsive and smooth as I would like, I didn't fully feel like I was doing great with the controls. It was very fun to play. There were certain like kind of combos you could do if you like ran and jump attacked or just ran and attacked. And the enemies were fun to just kind of beat down with your guitar. I genuinely had fun playing it. It was also cool when you get the like special power up when you finally get to that level and you start playing like really intensely, and then the game will just kind of knock you from one enemy to the next as long as you push their direction. So it feels like suddenly you're in like superpower mode. It was pretty cool. Again, there's like crazy rock music playing here. I'm not going to show you, but it was very good. When I got to the end, there was this big boss battle, and I felt like that was exceedingly difficult. Maybe I just need to get good. I don't know, but I struggled a lot with it. I did, however, because of that, realize because this was like the first time I died, there was like a mechanic of you die and then you kind of like lose it. Like you like lose one of your lives essentially, and when you run out, it like asked you like, do you want to continue? That felt a lot like an old arcade game. That being said, I never managed to beat the boss. Overall, I think this game was very good, and I just have some questions about the music and how that was sourced. But Rock the Apocalypse really rocked. Up next at number 9 with 21 ratings is Dementia Wizard by Comedy, Therma, Pixel Jam Jar, and Tyrannic 449. Again, I told you there was another wizard who doesn't have a good memory game, but this one was also very distinct. I also want to point out that while this game was ranked number 9 overall, this was number 1 in use of theme, so clearly people responded really well to that. So I really thought this was a great design all across the board. There were cool enemies, like several really cool enemies. There were cool attack designs, like the spells, for example. And I thought the levels were very simple, but they were aesthetically pleasing. One of those things where it just kind of fades into the background and you're able to focus on the gameplay, but it doesn't look bad. Do you know what I mean? I thought the gameplay was really fun and fast-paced. When the game first started, I wasn't sure like how I felt about the top-down player versus the side-facing enemies. But then very quickly my mind just kind of accepted it and it worked and I didn't think about it anymore. And the game looked great when I got past that little hurdle. I didn't fully understand at first that eventually you'll like defeat an enemy and he'll drop a thing that you have to stand in to go to the next level. So quite a while, for quite a while, the first level I played, I just kept like killing enemies and not knowing why I didn't understand. The use it or lose it mechanic for this is pretty straightforward. You can pick up spells that do things, and if you don't use them, the timer will just eventually count down and they'll be gone, and you'll just lose the ability to cast that spell. That made the gameplay kind of fast-paced and exciting. I also thought that it was a great touch that it kind of kept track of your stats as you played. It seemed like from the screenshots that there were some like even cooler enemies as you played the game and got further on. Because I was trying to get through all the games for the Game Jam, I didn't actually get that far. I did struggle a bit with this game, just because I'm not great at these types of games. I don't play them a lot. But I genuinely had fun, and I plan to kind of go back and play more of this at some point. Because I really want to see the future enemy designs that pop up. I mean, come on, you got a penguin and a Sandy Cheeks helmet. You got whatever these little things are. It was a lot of fun. And I'm genuinely excited to play a little more when I have time. Up in 8th place, we have Lost It by Bob. This was ranked number 8 overall, but this was our number 4 choice in use of theme. So first off, I love the design of this game. I love the design of the creatures especially. I love a little guy. A little creature. I felt like there were a lot of glitches, but the gameplay actually felt decently responsive moment to moment. I think a lot of the platformer type games I played for this jam, a lot of times I had kind of issues sometimes with how it controlled, which is where the difficulty came from sometimes, but with this one it was responsive, so the difficulty came from just trying to play, and sometimes the glitchiness. I also thought that there were some really fun mechanics, some ideas for the use it or lose it pop-ups, where you'd get like a circle of daggers around you, or you could shoot daggers, or you would do this thing where you would just suddenly fly around and chase your mouse, but this would always be very difficult because you could just die. If you flew off the edge of the screen, because there weren't colliders anymore, you would die. So you really had to like decide, like, is it time to use that? I thought it was really nice that there were multiple levels. That was a really nice touch, gave some replayability. I also liked how the game window matched the rest of the page. I thought that looked really cool. I didn't realize it at first because I was playing full screen, and then when I switched, I was like, oh, that's cool. I kept thinking as I was playing this feels like something that I would have played on like one of those like plug and play things when I was a kid. And I mean that in like the best way. It just felt fun and nostalgic, and I did enjoy playing this one a lot. I also felt like a lot of the UI was just very intuitive, and I didn't have to think too much about it. It's a quick click here or there. It's a timer very large up at the top so you can't miss it. It's a kind of bar down at the bottom filling up that you can't miss as well. But none of it was distracting, so I thought that was done very well. So all in all, Lost It, very good game. Nice job. Next up in 7th place we have Bub Blaster by Suited Rooster. This is number 7 overall, but this is number 5 in terms of gameplay. The use of theme was ranked a little lower, number 19, but that's partially because the way that the Game Jam was set up, you couldn't edit the game files once they were submitted, and there was a choice at the beginning of the game of use your weapons or just lose them and play in pretty much what becomes a hard mode, and because that wasn't able to be patched, it kind of dragged it down in terms of use of theme. But when this gets fixed, I look forward to playing it. This is one where I was playing and my girlfriend happened to walk through and she was like, oh, what's that? She vibed into the music. She really liked the tone of it and the look of everything, and so did I. So she sat and kind of played this one with me for a little bit. Overall, I thought the design of this was super fun. It was obviously eye-catching. It was very, very unique. I loved the design of the little guy. I also thought that it was super funny. The way that they set everything up, the way that they just kind of used the exposition was great. It wasn't too much. It was just some funny little details here and there, and I liked it. It was a great way to kind of lead into a game. Again, if you don't have these, sometimes games will just feel like mini games, but you'd be surprised how well exposition like this one will just take the game to the next level. In terms of the moment-to-moment gameplay, it was really fun. I genuinely enjoyed this one. It handled well once I got the hang of it. And the fact that you were kind of depowered more and more as you went through the game also added to the difficulty. Again, the main mechanic of use it or lose it, as far as I can tell, was the ability to kind of switch to a hard mode where you lose your weapons. And that, I assumed, gave a different ending, I think they mentioned. And I really hated that that wasn't available, and that just has to do with the way I set up the game jam. They were aware of the issue and they weren't able to patch it. But again, I look forward to playing it when it is patched. So nice job, Suited Rooster. Up next, at number 6, with 10 ratings, we have Hamburg Dash or Die. I think this might have just been a translation error, so I don't feel like I'm picking. I assume it was probably meant to be cheeseburger or hamburger. I liked the really fun little setup of like a fairy just wanting a cheeseburger and like accidentally making it sentient, and it's like, oh my god, I gotta use the magic to get out of here. I thought that was really fun. When I started playing, I found it like impossible at first to figure out what I was supposed to be doing. How I could not make this jump for the life of me, and I kept dying. I didn't get it. And then I eventually like went to the comments to kind of see what was going on, and someone pointed out the problem I was having. You can't really jump unless it's part of your dash. And once I figured that out, things became a little more clear. I struggled a lot with this one. It's very much like you have to keep dashing or you die, which means sometimes you'd have to panic and just go in weird directions to make sure that you're still dashing. I felt like this one, again, had the bones to be like a really good game. And the art style was pretty aesthetically pleasing in a very simple way. I liked the little ball hamburger. Maybe you guys don't know this about me. I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but I love cheeseburgers. It's like top tier. Not just food, just like they're great. They're great design. How could you get better than like bun, hamburger meat? I'm not going to explain how a cheeseburger works. I'm just excited. Maybe I'm hungry. I'm probably hungry as I'm talking about this. I should probably eat something else. That being said, Hamburg Dash or Die by Two Zones was a great game and I enjoyed playing it. And I thought it was very, very creative. It was ranked number 6th overall, but it was ranked number 4 in terms of creativity. And it's clear to see why. Up next, at number 5, we have Escape from Core by Average Crow Games. I thought this one had great design all across the board. And I also loved that the setup for this game was very much kind of maybe a dig at the people who were upset about the AI rules for this game jam. Just a little subtle thing. I really liked it. First off, loved the design of the robot. Thought it was so cute. Kind of WALL-E-esque, but also very distinct from WALL-E. So the comparisons weren't like, oh, this is a WALL-E knockoff. It was just, oh, this is a cute robot, like WALL-E is a cute robot. I really liked it. And I love the setup of you're like a little AI robot working against like the opposition of this prison type thing that you're in. It was really fun to kind of like upgrade yourself the right way to like explore and solve puzzles. It kind of felt like a heist game throughout where you're very much having to like make puzzle choices and get the right upgrades at any given moment to like break your way through like scanners or hack into things or, you know, use gadgets to levitate. Thought all of that was used very, very well. And I loved that at a certain point you're able to just kind of choose for yourself what you want to put on to go through the level once you got past the tutorial. Overall, this is definitely one I'd recommend going to play. I thought it was great. I thought it looked great. Personally, to me, this one felt like one of the more professional games that was thrown in this game jam. I really, really liked it. There was something about it throughout that just felt very cohesive. It kind of felt like something I would get on one of those, like, I don't know if anyone else played these, but the playtester disc, like the demo disc that you'd get for like PS2 back in the day, it felt like something that would be on that, and I would be like, oh my god, this is so cool, I gotta get this game. So, really, genuinely great job, Average Crow Games. Up next, in 4th place, with 23 ratings, we have Eat Shio by DOOY. This game was ranked number 4 overall and number 4 in style, but it seemed to be pulled down a little bit by gameplay. And I understand that the gameplay was simple, but I personally enjoyed it. It was submitted by DO_OY, but also the art seemed to be made by KDK Art. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say I loved that you went to the credits and when you kind of hovered your mouse over the different sections, they would just kind of slowly lift into the screen. I thought that was such a fun mechanic, going back and forth. I loved that they put their pictures in. I thought that was very fitting. Great way to do the credits. The credits felt great. The menu felt great. It was so freaking cool. Okay, so the setup is that you're working on a game jam to try and get it done. And so when you go into it, the difficulty settings are literally just exactly what it looks like when you're looking through game jams on the itch.io page. I thought that was a super cool detail. This game has a lot of great attention to detail. So you're sitting at the computer, you start working on the game for a while, then you have to eat. It keeps track of your hunger and your fatigue. And so you go into the kitchen to eat, and there are even like little notes up on the bulletin board here, the cork board, that you can actually scroll over. You can hover over and they'll pop up with what they say. Then you go in the fridge, you open it, there's all this food. It has expiration dates, and you have a certain amount of time to like use each item or it's going to expire. And if you eat it, it'll make you sick. So that's where I think a lot of the use it or lose it mechanic comes in, where if you don't eat your food in the right way or move it to the trash, you'll just lose it. I thought that was great. I thought everything was simple, but it was very clear UI. Everything had so much detail. There was expiration dates on everything. Everything had like a name. I loved it would pop up like, it's tomato. I loved like spickers. Great detail. So much good detail work in this one. So you eat, you have to go to bed, get the fatigue down. You're constantly balancing these numbers while trying to get the game done in a certain amount of time. This one felt very, very good to play. I understand why people might not have enjoyed the gameplay in the same way that I did, but I also loved how when you're working on the game, it tells you specifically what you're working on down there, like writing code or something, for example. This game is a lot of fun. I also really enjoyed the more difficult mode. I tried the hard mode before I stopped playing. For some reason with that one, it stopped telling me when things would expire. I think that might have been a glitch, but I just wanted to point it out. So I don't know if that was part of the difficulty curve. But because for some reason I couldn't see when things expired, I ended up spending a lot of time in the bathroom in this game, and I almost missed the deadline. So it was more difficult to play. Again, I just want to say this one felt professional. For a two-person team, they should be very, very proud. This was a great game. Everything from the settings, to the menu, to the gameplay itself, to the way the game worked, all the subtle little details made this one really, really pop. And I think if the gameplay could have been, I guess, more appealing to the masses, this game would have been ranked probably a little bit higher even. So nice job. And now we get to the final three. In third place is Plague and Madness by FDCZK. This is ranked number 3 overall with 24 ratings, but this was ranked number 1 in terms of style and number 3 in terms of creativity. The use of theme seems to be what dragged it down a little bit. It was ranked number 23 in that regard. Otherwise, this one might have been a little higher even. It's hard to tell. I understand why the use of theme dragged it down. I don't think people understood it necessarily. I personally liked the use of the theme. I thought that lose it, as in like to lose your sanity, was a good play on words. Like if you don't use the items to make your life easier, you're going to go insane. You're going to lose it. So in that way, I thought that this was a good way to twist what the meaning of the term meant. And so I respected that. Okay, visually, I thought this game was absolutely one of my favorites. It looked so good. Everything was really consistent throughout the entire game. Oh my god, it was so good. I loved how it looked. I thought it was fun to kind of walk around as the little plague doctor. I thought all the little details around looked very nice. I thought that the failure state was incredible, where if you failed, you kind of just looked like destroyed that you had failed to save these people. It was such a great cutaway from, like losing. I really just thought the design was fantastic, and it held together really well because of the consistency of it. It really, really stands out. I also loved the gameplay loop and the kind of pressure of the setup, where you're just trying to keep your stuff together. You're trying to keep it together, not lose your mind. And they keep bringing in people who are dying, and you have to try and help them. And there is a lot of intensity when you start trying to help them. So, you walk over to them, and then you have this big pop-up that's like a sort of mini game where you're brewing something to help them, and they're dying, so you got to do it real quick. And you have all these ingredients. You got to make sure you put them in the right order, and then you save a life. And you have to do this again and again and again, and they start to pile up even more, and I felt that the intensity really ramped up fast, and that was fun. When I made a mistake, I really felt bad about it. I just thought it looked so good, it felt so good to play. I didn't have literally any problems in terms of the actual little mini game of making the potions. I thought everything just worked well. You grabbed and clicked, you dragged it where it needed to go, you made the potion, you saved the life. So when I made a mistake, it was fully my fault because I wasn't paying attention and I was moving too fast. There was one issue in terms of gameplay that threw me off. And that is that there's this button. Okay, so first off, the button to start like the mini game to help save the person is E. So you press that to like open up the menu and start making these potions to help them. However, the button to like reset everything is R, which is right next to it. And more than once I was playing as having fun and then I accidentally hit that. I would have maybe moved that button somewhere else, but that's such like a picky little problem, and you gotta, that's the thing, when a game is really good, you start looking for like, is there anything that could be fixed? What went wrong with it? All in all, this game was phenomenal and it very much deserved to be in the top 3. So really, really good job. That being said, one thing I will point out is once I got the hang of the game, I don't think I ever had to use the items available in the shop. I could always manage to keep up on just going person to person. I don't know if that was intended or not. Next up, at second place, is Temple Tumble by AxelDev and the Erasable Sky, but it's ranked number 1 in terms of both creativity and gameplay. It seems like, if anything, the use of theme was what maybe dragged it down a little bit. It was number 11 in terms of that. Otherwise, this might have been number 1. I think the use of theme wasn't bad, it just wasn't on the forefront of my mind throughout the game like some of games were. But this one had so many great details that I loved. So first off, right off the bat, you're asked to like put in a username. And that's so that it can keep track of leaderboards. Obviously, when you look at this menu, there's a lot going on here. There's play, there's settings, there's tutorial, there's leaderboards, there's quit. I liked the sound effects that went along with opening the door each time you chose an option. So once I went through the settings and the credits, I went into the tutorial. I thought it was so cool that this one had a tutorial that was like separate than the start of the game. Clearly a lot of work was put into this, and I really appreciate the thought. So you go into the tutorial and you're immediately talking to this elder axolotl, and you're called like a young axolotl adventurer. Clearly, because my last game was named after an axolotl and prominently featured them, I love axolotls. So I don't know if this was done purposefully or you just also like them, but so cool. I thought the tutorial was really well done. It walks you through each thing that you need to know. And I thought that it was a great choice because the mechanics of this do get pretty complex later on. Specifically when the wheel comes along that changes the area that you're in and the spells or the attacks that you're using. I thought that was really well done. I also genuinely really thought the gameplay was fun. I struggled sometimes with the platforming element of it, but I know that was just my fault. The game itself was really fun, and I felt like it worked well if, once you put in a lot of work to get the hang of it. And you wanted to because there were leaderboards. I thought it was really cool how detailed everything was. Specifically, there were all of these options for different things you could be changed into. The world would literally just be changed by this wheel, and your attacks and everything would change around that as well. The use of theme was brought up because of, essentially, if you don't use one of the blocks, one of the sections, it'll start to fog up and it'll just disappear, and you literally won't be able to use that block anymore. This one was so much fun to play. I loved it. I thought it looked cool. I thought it played good. I thought it was so creative. I felt like it was one that could be replayed again and again and again, and I probably will. This one could have just been released as a game that you could tell me you worked weeks on and I would have believed you. Really impressive that this was done for a game jam. This was fun, the gameplay was fun, it looked great, the creatures, the enemies were designed well, the game over screen was even really unique and interesting. So this one was really great, really phenomenal, and it really deserves to be so high up in the list. I think if you would have just made the use of theme more prominent in people's mind, made it affect the gameplay more, it would have maybe done a little better in that category. But seriously, fantastic job. I'm really going to keep trying to get on the leaderboard. And finally, at our top spot, first place with 10 ratings is Over Under Flow by Sip. This one was ranked number 1 overall, number 2 in terms of creativity, number 3 in terms of gameplay, number 5 in style, and number 5 in use of theme. This is a great example of, even though it wasn't even number 1 in any given category, it did end up being the overall winner because of how well it used every single thing. It might not have been the best, necessarily, the absolute best at any given thing, but across the board, this one was really well done. This is a prime example of why you shouldn't ignore any aspect for another. This one was really well done in every category. So clearly right off the bat, this one looks great. And also it plays great. This is like an example of, this wasn't like a ridiculously exceptional type of gameplay. It was just a really well done puzzle game. It was aware of what it was trying to be, and it did it very well. It was challenging, but challenging for the right reasons. Everything that you did felt good and felt right. Eventually, when I got the hang of the gameplay, I understood why everything worked the way that it did, and it felt great. There's not like a whole lot to say about this one. I didn't really have any complaints. I felt like everything just worked. This is a prime example of just a game working. It was a fantastic puzzle game, and everything just worked very smoothly. And I felt like it was one of those games where I just had to put in the work to get better at what I was doing. So Osip, you should be very proud of this. This was a phenomenal game, and I really enjoyed playing it. Every aspect of it was really, really good. So congratulations on being number one, and thank you for submitting. And that's it. That's every game that was playable for this game jam played, and a few extras that missed the deadline. I consider this entire game jam to be an absolute win. It made my heart so incredibly full to see how many people submitted, how many incredible projects there were, how many games were just so well done, how many new developers got involved and tried to make something, and how much support there was behind the scenes for everyone trying to get this game jam complete. So this video is so long, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut there, but thank you so much. And I just want you to know I'm so proud of every game that was submitted for this game jam. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope it was a good experience and helped you learn and grow. And I hope that if you watch this video, maybe you learned something from the other games that were submitted as well. I'm so proud. Thank you guys so much.